What if the story around Lil Flip reacting to Usher and DaBaby is not just another random celebrity moment being blown out online, but something that actually connects back to old industry conversations that people ignored at the time because they did not seem important then, but now suddenly feel very different in hindsight? Because sometimes the truth is not hidden in new events, but buried inside old clips, interviews, and forgotten reactions that resurface at the exact moment when people are least expecting it. Because right now the internet is going crazy over a situation where Lil Flip reportedly lost his calm after seeing or hearing something related to Usher and DaBaby that brought back a wave of questions, discussions, and theories that nobody was really talking about before. And the strange part is how quickly this small moment turned into a much bigger conversation, where fans are now trying to connect dots between different artists, different timelines, and different incidents that may or may not actually be connected at all, but still feel linked when you look at them through the lens of online speculation. And this is where things start getting more intense, because Lil Flip is not someone who usually gets pulled into random internet drama, but his reaction alone has made people curious about what exactly triggered it and why the specific topic involving Usher and DaBaby is suddenly gaining attention again after being quiet for so long. And now every old clip, every past interview, and every unrelated moment is being reanalyzed like there is something hidden inside them that was never fully noticed before. So the real question becomes very simple, but very uncomfortable at the same time, because is this just another case of social media exaggeration, where people are connecting random pieces of information? Or is there actually something deeper behind the scenes that is slowly resurfacing through these old conversations, reactions, and industry connections that are now being looked at in a completely new way by fans who believe there is always more to the story than what is officially set out loud? To really understand why the situation involving Lil Flip, Usher, and DaBaby is suddenly trending again, you first have to understand the different worlds these artists come from, because each one represents a different era of the music industry and different ways fame actually works behind the scenes. Lil Flip came up in a time where success was built on pure grind, mixtape, street buzz, and independent movement before social media was controlling everything. So his perspective on the industry has always been shaped by independence and control over his own career, rather than being fully managed by big systems. So whenever his name gets pulled into discussions like this, people naturally pay attention, because he has always spoken from an outside looking in point of view when it comes to mainstream industry structure. Usher, on the other hand, represents a completely different level of the entertainment world, because his career is deeply rooted in the mainstream machine, where success is built through long-term industry relationships, label backing, and carefully managed public image over decades. And that kind of career naturally puts him in a position where every move, every collaboration, and every public moment gets analyzed more closely, especially when old clips resurface in a new context. Then you have DaBaby, who represents a more modern wave of fame, where viral moments, streaming numbers, and internet culture play a huge role in how fast an artist rises and how quickly attention shifts around them. So his career exists in a very different space compared to both Lil Flip and Usher. But because of that difference, even small connections or mentions between them online tend to stand out more and get overanalyzed by fans, trying to find meaning in cross-era interactions. Now, when you place all three names together in one conversation, it immediately creates curiosity, because they are not normally discussed in the same context. And that is exactly what makes the situation interesting for social media, because the internet loves unexpected combinations and hidden link theories, even when the original context is very simple. Recently, old clips, interviews, and past discussions started circulating again, where these names were either mentioned directly or indirectly. And once that happened, people began revisiting everything with a different mindset. Instead of seeing it as isolated moments, they started trying to connect them like pieces of a bigger puzzle, even though there is no confirmed evidence that they were ever part of the same narrative in any deeper way. But that is how online culture works today. Once a few clips start trending together, people begin creating timelines, comparisons, and breakdowns, try to understand if there is a hidden relationship between events that originally had nothing to do with each other. And in this case, the involvement of Lil Flip's reaction only added fuel to that curiosity, because now it was not just about old content, it was about how someone inside the industry responded to it. And that is why this topic is gaining Attention again because it sits at the intersection of three very different music eras, three very different career paths, and a very active internet audience that is constantly searching for meaning patterns and hidden connections, even in situations where the original story might have been much simpler than what it is being turned into right now. The reason this entire situation suddenly started gaining attention again is not because of any new official statement or confirmed event, but because of resurfaced content that began circulating across different social media platforms at the same time. And once that happens, the internet usually takes something small and turns it into something much bigger than it originally was. It started with old clips and fragmented moments from past interviews and appearances involving Usher and DaBaby that were reposted without full context. And when content like this comes back into circulation, people rarely watch it the same way twice, because their perception has already changed based on everything that has happened since those clips were originally recorded. In the beginning, it looked like just random nostalgia posts or fan pages sharing old memories, but very quickly certain parts of those clips started getting highlighted, slowed down, and analyzed in detail, especially expressions, pauses, and specific wording that at the time did not seem important, but now appear different when viewed through a modern lens of constant speculation and over-analysis. This is where Lil Flip's name unexpectedly entered the conversation, because according to online discussions and commentary, he reportedly came across some of this resurfaced material, and his reaction was not something people expected to see or hear about in a casual way, and that alone immediately made the situation more interesting for fans who follow celebrity culture closely. Now, it is very important to understand that reactions in the entertainment world often get exaggerated or misinterpreted online, because even a simple emotional response can be turned into a viral moment depending on how it is presented. But in this case, the reason it gained traction is because multiple users started repeating the same claim at the same time, which created the impression that something significant had actually happened behind the scenes. Once that narrative started spreading, people began trying to piece together what exactly Lil Flip might have seen or understood that triggered such a strong reaction, and this naturally led to more digging into old content involving Usher and DaBaby, even if those clips originally had no direct connection to each other. At this stage, the discussion stopped being about one specific moment and started turning into a broader search for hidden meaning in unrelated timelines, because fans began to believe that if Lil Flip reacted strongly, then there must be something deeper worth discovering, even though no verified source confirmed any actual controversy between the individuals involved. The internet then did what it does best, which is build theories based on fragments of information and emotional interpretation rather than complete context. And as more people joined the conversation, different versions of the same story started appearing across platforms, each adding slightly different details or interpretations, which made the situation even more confusing but also more viral. Some users began linking Usher and DaBaby through indirect industry connections, while others focused more on Lil Flip's reaction itself, treating it as the central piece of the puzzle, even though there is still no clear evidence of any specific event that ties all these elements together in a factual way. And this is what makes the story spread so fast, because uncertainty creates engagement, and engagement creates more theories, which then feed back into more discussions, and before long, a simple resurfaced clip becomes a full trending topic with multiple layers of interpretation. So at this point, what started as old footage being reshared has now turned into a much larger internet conversation, where perception is driving the narrative more than actual confirmed information. And that is exactly why people are still talking about it, trying to figure out whether there is something real behind all the noise or whether it's just another example of how quickly online discussions can evolve into something far bigger than their original source once the clips involving Usher and DaBaby started circulating more widely and Lil Flip's reaction became part of the discussion. The situation quickly moved beyond simple fan curiosity and entered a full-scale internet theory phase where different communities began building their own interpretations of what was really happening, even though there was no single verified event confirming any of it. The first wave of reactions came from casual viewers who simply saw the resurfaced clips and commented based on emotion rather than analysis, saying things like, "This feels different now," or "I never noticed this part before." And that kind of reaction might seem small, but when multiplied across thousands of users, it becomes a foundation for a viral narrative, because it creates a shared sense of curiosity that something hidden might exist. Even when there is no proof, then came the breakdown accounts, and commentary channels who started slowing down clips, zooming in on expressions, analyzing tone shifts, and reinterpreting old interviews as if they contained coded meaning that was not obvious at first viewing. And this is where the story started evolving from simple nostalgia into structured theory building, because once people start analyzing body language pauses and wording, everything begins to feel intentional even when it may not be. At the same time, Lil Flip's name being attached to the discussion added a completely new layer, because now it was not just fans analyzing old content. It was also the idea that someone within the industry had a strong emotional reaction to what was being rediscovered online. And that made people believe there might be something deeper that insiders understand, but the public does not fully see from their different theories started. Spreading across platforms, some users suggested that the resurfaced clips were being misinterpreted and that there was nothing unusual at all, while others began connecting unrelated moments from different years, try to build a timeline that explained why these names were suddenly appearing together again, even though they were never officially linked in any major public storyline. As the theories grew more complex, the narrative also started to shift from simple curiosity into speculation about industry relationships and behind-the-scenes dynamics, where fans began questioning whether certain interactions or moments from the past had hidden meaning that only becomes visible when viewed with current context. And that is a common pattern in viral celebrity discussions, because the human brain naturally tries to find patterns even in disconnected information. This is also where confirmation bias plays a major role, because once someone believes there is something hidden, they start noticing details that support that belief while ignoring details that contradict it. And that is exactly what happened here, as different users selectively highlighted parts of clips, interviews, and reactions that seemed to support their version of the theory, while leaving out everything else. Meanwhile, reaction videos and commentary posts amplified the situation even further, because every new video added another interpretation, another angle, and another layer of storytelling, which made the original situation feel much larger than it actually was in reality. And over time, the distinction between fact and interpretation started to blur for many viewers. Another important factor is how algorithm-driven platforms work, because once a topic starts gaining engagement, the algorithm pushes similar content to more users, which creates an echo effect where more people are exposed to the same idea repeatedly. And repeated exposure naturally increases the feeling that something is significant, even if the original source is minimal or unclear. In the middle of all this, Lil Flip's reaction continued to be a focal point, because it gave a discussion a human, emotional anchor. Someone reacting strongly always makes a story feel more real to audiences, even when the context of that reaction is not fully understood. And that emotional element is what kept people engaged and searching for more details. As the discussion expanded even further, some users began framing the situation as part of a larger pattern in the music industry, where old clips and resurfaced moments are often re-examined whenever new narratives become popular, even if those clips were never meant to carry hidden meaning in the first place. And this cycle of reinterpretation is what keeps stories like this alive long after their original context has faded. But despite all the theory, speculation, and breakdowns, there is still no confirmed explanation that directly connects all the elements being discussed. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the conversation going. Because as long as there are unanswered questions, people will continue filling those gaps with their own interpretations, creating a constantly evolving narrative that changes depending on who is telling it and how they choose to frame it. The reason this entire situation involving Lil Flip, Usher and DaBaby has resurfaced again is not because of any new confirmed incident, but because of how the internet constantly recycles old content and gives it new meaning depending on the current mood of the audience and the type of conversations already happening online. And this is something that happens very often in celebrity culture, where past interviews, clips, and moments suddenly feel relevant again, even if they were originally ignored or misunderstood. One of the biggest reasons this story is trending again is timing, because the internet works in cycles where certain topics become active again when similar discussions are already popular. And once a few users start engaging with old clips, the algorithm begins pushing that content to a wider audience, which creates a chain reaction where more and more people start seeing the same material, even if they were not originally searching for it. In this case, the resurfaced Usher and DaBaby clips acted as a trigger point, but what really pushed the situation into trending territory was the addition of emotional reactions and commentary surrounding Lil Flip, Because whenever a known name reacts strongly to something, it automatically increases curiosity and makes people want to understand the reason behind that reaction, even if the full context is not publicly available. Another major factor is how audiences consume content today, because people no longer just watch interviews or clips once and move on. Instead, they rewatch, analyze, slow down, and compare older content with newer narratives, which means even small details that were once overlooked can suddenly become the center of discussion, and that shift in attention can completely change how a situation is perceived. Social media platforms also play a huge role in this process, because once a topic starts gaining engagement through likes, shares, and comments, it gets amplified through recommendation systems, which expose it to users who have no prior context. And when new audiences see old content without background information, they often interpret it in new ways, which adds more layers of speculation to the original material. In addition to that, there is also the psychological factor of curiosity, because people are naturally drawn to unfinished stories or unclear situations. And when something feels like it might have hidden meaning or missing context, it becomes more engaging than straightforward information. And that is exactly what is happening here, because there is no single clear explanation that ties everything together, which leaves room for interpretation. Another reason the story is trending is because of the way different communities on the internet interact with celebrity culture. Some focus on entertainment and nostalgia, while others focus on deeper analysis and theory building. And when both of these groups start engaging with the same content at the same time, the result is a mix of perspectives that makes the topic feel more complex than it actually is. It is also important to understand that the music industry itself has a long history of being heavily discussed and analyzed by fans. So, whenever names like Usher or DaBaby come into the same conversation, it automatically draws attention, because both artists have large fan bases and strong public visibility, which increases the reach of any discussion involving them, even if the connection between them is indirect or based on speculation. At the same time, Lil Flip's involvement in the discussion adds another layer, because he represents a different era of music and independence, which makes his reaction feel more significant to audiences who see him as someone outside the modern mainstream system. And that contrast between eras creates even more curiosity about why he would react strongly to content involving newer generation artists. There's also the role of repetition in viral trends, because once a topic starts appearing across multiple platforms in different formats, such as clips, commentary, posts, breakdown videos, and reaction, content begins to feel larger than it actually is. And this repeated exposure reinforces the idea that something important is happening, even if the original source material has not changed. In reality, what is happening here is a combination of resurfaced content, emotional interpretation, algorithm amplification, and audience curiosity, all working together at the same time, which creates a situation where an old topic suddenly feels new again and gains traction without any official update or confirmed development. So the reason this story is trending again is not because of a single event, but because of how internet culture transforms old information into new narratives based on timing, engagement, and perception. And as long as audiences continue engaging with this type of content, it will keep resurfacing in different forms each time, gaining a slightly different meaning depending on how it is being discussed at that moment. At this point, the situation around Lil Flip and the resurfaced discussion involving Usher and DaBaby sits in a very interesting space, because there is no confirmed incident, no official explanation, and no clear statement that directly explains why this topic suddenly gains so much attention again. And that leaves everything in a zone where interpretation becomes more powerful than facts, because people are naturally trying to fill the gaps with their own understanding of what they're seeing online. What started as old clips being reshared has now turned into a layered internet conversation where emotion, curiosity, and speculation are all mixed together. And once that happens, it becomes very difficult to separate what is actual information from what is audience interpretation, because every viewer adds their own perspective to the same material. And that creates multiple versions of the same story existing at the same time. Some people will look at this entire situation and see nothing more than a classic example of how social media revives old content and gives it new meaning without any real foundation, while others will feel that there might be deeper context behind why certain reactions and clips are being discussed together, even if that context is not fully visible or confirmed in public sources. And both of these perspectives exist side by side, without either one being officially proven. And that is what makes stories like this so powerful in today's digital world, because Attention itself becomes the driving force behind a narrative rather than facts or confirmations. And once attention shifts toward a topic, it begins to evolve on its own through repetition, commentary, and reinterpretation across different platforms. In the end, there is still no clear answer that connects all the dots in a factual way, and that is important to understand because not every viral moment comes with hidden truth. Sometimes it is just timing, perception, and the way content is consumed in modern internet culture, where old information can feel new again depending on how it is presented and who is discussing it. So when you step back and look at the bigger picture, this entire situation is less about proving something right or wrong, and more about understanding how quickly narratives can form in the entertainment world and how easily old moments can be reinterpreted into something completely different when they resurface at the right time. And maybe that is the real takeaway from all of this, because in an era where everything is constantly recorded, shared, and replayed, nothing ever fully disappears. It just waits for the moment when it gets attention again, and when that moment comes, the meaning of the content can change, completely depending on the audience that is watching it now compared to the audience that saw it years ago.